Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective collaborative channel, and this week we are answering a question talking about a topic suggested by Moonstone Mama. The text will be in the description of the video as usual. I'm going to paraphrase it. I have it up here on my split screen so that I can look at it and record at the same time. Technology sometimes is just wonderful. So I'm going to paraphrase. Moonstone Mama is asking us to talk about certain people fearing negative consequences of certain types of magic. In this case, we happen to be talking about protective magic or defensive magic. So they said that it's something that's been bothering them for a while. They notice that, at least in their country, which is not noted, by the way, which I think is a good thing, and I'll get to that in a second. But at least in their country, they're noticing that a lot of the older members of the pagan / witchy demographic tend to be kind of passive. These are their words, tend to be kind of passive and even a little bit paranoid and scared that they seem to not want to do any type of defensive or protective magic, anything to protect themselves from this, that, and the other thing, instead preferring to stay hands off and let the universe take care of it for them, kind of thing. And they also said that these people tend to think that you would be lowering yourself to the other person's level if you were to do something in your own self-defense, that you would be lowering yourself to the level of the person harming you. And so the question is how we feel about that topic, because they don't believe that that is the way that magic works or that is what magic is for. So that's what we're talking about. So firstly, I would like to say I'm glad that they didn't specify what country, because I don't want this to become a thing where the thing that sticks in people's minds about this week's videos is, oh, I've heard that people from this country, the old witches in this country, are really passive and don't do anything and they suck and I disagree with them. Like, I don't want this to become a country-specific thing. I also don't feel that it is fair to make it a generational thing or say that older people are like this as a rule. And so I don't want anyone to take this and go out into the world and say older witches and pagans are so passive and paranoid and scared, because you will stand corrected quickly. So with that in mind, obviously this person said this is something they have experienced and observed with the older members of their community in their particular area, at least. So they're only speaking to that experience. Let's not turn it into generalizations and blanket statements, because that will not work. It never works for pagans, witches, any of us. It doesn't work. We're not all alike. So I can say from my personal experience, again, as that's all we can really ever speak to, the pagans and witches that I know, this kind of situation is not limited to a certain generation. It's not limited to a certain path or tradition. It's just about personal beliefs, and that can differ between all of those other different categories that we may fall into. A lot of the older pagans and witches that I have met in my area, in my personal life, who I've interacted with, the older ones tend to be some of the most outspoken and the most forthright about wanting to teach the importance of defensive magic and stuff like that, and being very clear about teaching us youngins, relatively speaking, that there's a difference between defending yourself and starting the fight, right? It's just like in the world in general, just like in our quote-unquote mundane lives outside of magic. We know that there's a difference between doing something in self-defense and doing something first, unprovoked, just because, one is generally more acceptable, because if someone has hurt or harmed you and you are reacting in self-defense because you feel threatened, that is different than you going up to some completely innocent person who has done nothing to you and picking a fight. So, yeah, in my experience, a lot of the older people that I know are the least passive when it comes to that kind of thing. They're all about, like, no, we have to set this right. You have to stand up for yourself. But, of course, there are lots of young people like that too. So it's really not limited. There are also young people who don't think that they should do anything like this, who are really fearful of negative consequences. And so I don't think it's an age thing. I also don't think it's an older versus newer as far as like how much experience does someone have, because of course we can have newer members of the group who are chronologically older in the world, and we can have people who have been doing it for a long time who are younger because they started much, much younger, So I don't think it's either one of those things. I think it's a personal thing. It's about personal world beliefs. It's about your own experiences and how you've observed things working in the world. And it might also be a level of fear, that how much do you fear negative consequences if you do something that you think might be wrong, quote unquote. So for me, this is also a thing, like a while back we did videos talking about whether or not we think it's possible to curse on accident. And I've been doing a lot more thinking about that type of thing since then, because what I found out that week with all of our videos that we posted, and from people's comments and then posts that I saw some of my friends making on Facebook and all other kinds of social media after that, was that we all mean very different things when we talk about curses. That like some of us think one thing qualifies and another doesn't. And some people think, well, all of that counts, all of it is. And some people think that it's a good thing, and some people think, no, all of it's bad, right? So I've noticed that it really depends. And that kind of thing is really what's coming up for me when I'm thinking about this defensive magic type thing. Because it makes sense to me when very new practitioners, whatever their physical age may be, when very new practitioners are afraid to get started doing spells. Because, and we've talked about this on Pagan Perspective before too, of course, because there are a lot of sources out there, there are a lot of people online, there are a lot of people in real life, face-to-face life, who will warn you about things, and we will too. We've talked about the price of magic and all this kind of thing before on the channel too. So it makes more sense to me when people are kind of new to it, they don't really know how they feel about things yet, and they don't want to do anything wrong. So until they really know how they feel about it, they don't want to try it, because people warn you about, like, oh, you're going to mess with some stuff you don't know, and there's going to be negative consequences. And people are like, oh, well, I don't want that, so I'm going to wait till I know what I'm doing and have more experience. But then, of course, it's like, how do you gain experience unless you do the thing? It's a vicious cycle, right? So there's that kind of thing. Then there's people who have been doing this for a really, really long time, and who have been on this path for a long time and practicing and doing their positive magics and whatever other kind of thing. And so they might have their own personal reasons for why they believe that they shouldn't cast a protection spell, or if someone else is hurting or harming them in some way, that they shouldn't do anything to defend themselves. There must be some reason for that to be the case for them. And for other people, that's going to be very different. So it might have to do with, in general, like How did the people who raised us teach us to behave on the playground? Were you brought up in the kind of area and with people who believe that if somebody punches you, you should punch them back as hard as you can in self-defense to get them to stop? Or did you come from the school of thought that if somebody hits you, you run and tell the playground monitor as soon as you can? Like you shouldn't touch them, but you should find someone else who is in charge who can exact a punishment for that person. So yeah, so are you the kind of person who believes that you should immediately mete out your own punishment in defense of yourself? Or should you go to someone else and have them do it for you? Or should you do nothing? Should you just take it and just deal with it because that's the way the world is and people are always going to be that way and you're never going to be able to change it? Obviously, from the tone of my voice, you know that I don't prefer that third option. But I feel like that is a lot of how we, my friends and I, growing up in grade school, I feel like that's a lot of what we were expected to do. And that's what we hear a lot now, today, from people who want to defend the playground bully, that we shouldn't bother teaching kids not to bully because it's not going to do anything. Kids are always going to bully. We should just deal with it and let it happen. I don't personally agree with that. And so, yeah, I think this kind of thing, even though we're talking about magic in paganism and witchcraft, we're talking about spellcraft, stuff like this, I think it could all stem from that kind of thing. It really goes back to that basic kind of reaction. What do you think should be done? Fight, flight, freeze, right? It's that kind of same reaction. Now, for me personally, getting involved in paganism and witchcraft, from the very beginning, the sources that I was reading made a very clear distinction between defensive magic and that it would be considered wrong or harmful, whatever word fits there, to attack someone out of nowhere for no reason. If you do that, then yeah, you're being a mean, negative person for no reason. But if someone else is harming you, that there are things that you can do in self-defense. And there are also preventative measures that you can take. So usually protective magic, things like casting a protection spell around your home or around your pet or around your vehicle, or making protection charms for your kids to take with them when they go off to school. So there's a little bit of a, your protective magic travels with the people who you love and care about, right? These are preventative things. They are just meant to be there in case, just in case something happens. It's kind of like how I was thinking about this earlier today, just going about my day. And I thought of how a lot of people that I know, or not a lot of people that I know, that's not true. I'm thinking more of TV shows that I've seen, TV shows and movies that I've seen, and a few people who I know keep a baseball bat somewhere in their house, near their front door or by their bed, for self-defense, just in case anyone ever breaks into their home or something like that. And there are various other implements that people use for self-defense. I don't want to make this about that, but it's that kind of idea, right? That someone might have something in place ahead of time, such as casting a protection spell, just in case something happens. Of course, you're hoping that nothing happens and that you won't ever need it to happen. It's the same reason we have airbags in our car, right? You're hoping you never need them, but you want to make sure that they're working and that they're gonna deploy if anything does happen, So yeah, I mean, gosh, this could also relate to, the kinds of people who believe that you should or should not wear a seatbelt. Now, I know that some people have been hurt more in accidents because they were wearing seatbelts, but there are also a lot of people whose lives are saved by wearing seatbelts. But it's this same kind of idea, right? Do you think that you should take a preventative measure in case something happens, or do you do nothing? And obviously that so now I'm thinking of, obviously, like some other related things like victim blaming. If something does happen, is it your fault? If you get in a car accident, was it your fault because you decided to be in a car? You could have taken a preventative measure and not been in the car. So obviously there are lots and lots of directions that we can take this and lots of examples, but I think that's what it comes down to, that the way you feel about defensive magic has a lot to do with how you feel about defending yourself, period, in a mundane sense. And how safe do you feel? If you feel generally safe, you might be less likely to think that you need a protection spell that you are going to maintain on a monthly or semi-annual basis, whatever it may be. If you are someone who regularly feels unsafe, you are more likely to take more preventative measures and to have more defensive tools in your toolbox than someone who generally feels safe. So I think that's what it comes down to. I don't think that it's older versus younger. I don't think that it's more experienced versus less experienced, one country versus another. That's my view on it. And it also might depend on what sources you've read that brought you into the craft, obviously. Because, like I said, the things that I started learning, it always made a very clear distinction that, like, defensive magic was not considered negative. It was, if you cross the line from self-defense to being the one who attacks first, that you would have to deal with repercussions. And some people are willing to deal with consequences, and so that's fine. And some people just aren't willing to deal with consequences. So generally, that's just a guideline to, like, before you do anything, make sure that you're willing to accept whatever consequences may bounce back at you, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise, in between, whatever. Do you think that your cause is just enough? Do you think that it is just? Do you think that it is right and necessary so much that you're willing to accept if anything bad might happen to you? Some people are, some people aren't. I think that's what it comes down to. Yeah. So those are my thoughts. The last thing I wanted to mention at the end of the suggestion here, Moonstone Mama said, I believe that magic is there to give back power to those who were once powerless. I'd like to know what your opinions are on this. I agree that I don't think the universe works in such a way that it's just going to take care of things. I do think that we have to take responsibility for ourselves in many ways, not just for what we say and do, but also how we react and whether or not we defend ourselves. I don't think that we can be blamed for other people attacking us in the first place. I have been someone who has been on the receiving end of harmful situations before. I don't think that I deserve the blame for those things. I don't think that anyone else deserves the blame for being attacked in any way, shape, or form. But I am responsible for what I do with that and how I deal with it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's something that I deal with constantly, and I go up and down about it, from blaming myself, not blaming myself, feeling justified in doing this, that, or the other thing, and then not feeling justified, and questioning. It's a whole big, it's a thing. It's hard. Life is hard. But in that, I just mean to say that paganism in general, like my path, what I do with my path, whether it be the meditative aspects of it, or whether it be the celebration aspects of it, or whether it be the spellcraft aspects of it, I take responsibility for my path and for my path's development and ultimately what I do with that. So that just sort of goes along with this topic to me. And I don't know that I would say that I think the purpose of magic is to give power back to those who were once powerless. I think that is a thing that magic does. I don't know if I would say that I think its purpose. I don't know if I believe that there is a purpose to magic. I believe that magic exists and that it is. And we are then responsible for what we do with that. It's a tool that we use. It's a force that exists. It's a fact. It's a thing. I don't really know how to verbalize it. But yeah, I don't know that it necessarily has to have a purpose in order to be meaningful. So those are my thoughts right now, today, in this moment. It might change tomorrow because I tend to start thinking about these things right after I make the video even more, even though I've been thinking about it for a week and I've been thinking about it really hard all day getting ready to do the video. I'm going to keep thinking about it. My views are going to keep changing about these things. But yeah. So you can discuss in the comments if you like. Let us know how you feel about defensive magic and protection magic, and what you were first taught about it when you were starting on your journey. If you are just starting on the leg of your journey that has you looking into paganism and or witchcraft, let us know what are the types of sources that you're reading right now saying about things such as protection and defensive magic. And yeah, let's try not to generalize and have blanket statements, because we will stand corrected. I will see you next week. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.